AC/DC frontman Bon Scott's untimely death was ruled as death by misadventure, but those who'd seen him that night believed the real cause was much more sinister. Before we get to that though, let's dive into the life of Bon Scott. Bon Scott's long way to the top of rock and roll was full of missteps, misunderstandings, and a few misdemeanors. But no one could deny that Scott was certainly on a trajectory to superstardom. All he had to do was keep it together and let the money, fans, and stardom come to him. Scott had a curse, and it was not about to let his life be easy, or even very long. Bon Scott was born Ronald Belford Scott in Forfar, Scotland, on July 9, 1947. His mom's name was Isabel, and his dad was Charles Belford Scott. It sounded like a joyful family life, but then fate served them up a devastating tragedy. Bon Scott had an older brother, but he never even got the chance to meet him. Sandy passed right after Bon was born. Once the Scotts produced another son, perhaps to fill Sandy's shoes, they were ready for a big change. They packed up what they had and started an adventure on the other side of the world. The Scotts moved to Australia and Bon started school. He was still going by Ronald at the time, but his class already had a Ronald. To remedy this, Scott's classmates, making a joke out of Bonnie Scotland, named him Bon. The truth was, there wasn't much Bonnie about Scott. In fact, he was about to get into some real trouble. By the age of 15, Scott had dropped out of school and was working in various jobs. That's when things took a dark turn. His list of offenses include giving a fake name to officers, absconding a large tank of gasoline, and having unlawful carnal knowledge. This behavior did not amuse the judge, and Scott spent the next year in juvenile detention. When Scott got out, he came up with his next logical deduction. He belonged in the army. Bon Scott may have wanted to join the army, but the army did not want him. They labeled him socially maladjusted, so Scott turned to something he picked up back in detention: playing guitar. While working part-time jobs, Scott founded the Spectres, which morphed into the Valentines. Believe it or not, the future hard rocker was now in a bubblegum pop band. This would have continued, but an earth-shattering scandal broke them up. The Valentines were having disagreements about musical direction, but these problems were soon eclipsed when authorities caught them in possession of illicit substances. Half the band promised to quit grass, and others, including Scott, decided not to. In fact, Scott took this opportunity to speak publicly about the virtues of marijuana. This proved to not be the greatest idea. Bon Scott spoke to anyone he could find in the media about how backward the Australian government was. He thought they should legalize his drug of choice and went on to speak about gay rights as well. The truth was that Scott and his bandmates were playing with fire. You see, the officers could have caught them with something much, much worse. Bon Scott and his bandmates were doing much harder stuff. But herb was what the officers had caught them with. They all got off with a light fine, and the band tried to get their career going again. It wasn't meant to be. The Valentines broke up and Scott was a free man. The only problem was that Scott didn't like being free. Scott went in search of a new band, but found something even more. He moved to Adelaide and hooked up with a band called Fraternity, which was a better fit for Scott. He also hooked up with a woman, Irene Thornton, and the two quickly got serious. Scott was in a good place. He had a relationship and a new band that worked for him, but it was while working with Fraternity that he discovered his kryptonite. One member of Fraternity, Bruce Howe, remembers that there was one thing that made Bon Scott crazy. His curse was that he couldn't stand being bored. When the band was between gigs, Scott would start acting out. Howe remembers climbing on the back of Scott's motorcycle when Scott was in the middle of one of his restless periods. Howe said they went so fast and turned so sharply that his boots were scraping against the road. Howe survived, but vowed to never get on the back of Scott's bike again. He also warned Scott to stop riding his motorcycle while under the influence. Not heeding this advice would lead to a world of pain for Scott.